Video games are meant to be just one thing: fun. Fun for everyone. I think a lot of gamers nowadays should come back and reflect on this quote. Video games were created with the purpose of being fun first and foremost. Sure, video games can still have compelling stories, memorable characters, tackle themes and ideas that relate to our everyday life, or just be funny as shit.
Still want a gift basket?
You bet I do!
It's all yours.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Want this?
No! The gift basket!
Guys?
But the primary purpose of video games is that they are meant to be fun first. I mean, that's just common sense when you get right down to it. Seriously, every time I see a stupid-ass debate about video games of all things, I just want to tell them, get a life.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
There's a difference between constructively criticizing games and having outright temper tantrums about them. But let's get back to the first thing I mentioned in this video. Video games are meant to be fun. Plus, I always love when side characters in gaming franchises get the spotlight in their own games, because it lets you see things that may seem familiar, but feature a brand new perspective to pull the audience in. Luigi's Mansion proved that a Mario game can work really well without Mario himself as the main protagonist, and ever since that fateful day in 2001, we've become more accustomed to side characters getting spin-off games, and Peach was definitely a character that deserved a game of her own. While Super Princess Peach is a good game and her helping out in some Super Mario games is always nice to see, I was mostly waiting for a Peach game that could fully be declared her own and not feel too familiar like being a platformer or her helping the Mario Brothers out. Plus, really quick, is it just me or did Nintendo really lean towards the stereotypes with Super Princess Peach despite being a good game? Like her emotions acting as power-ups for her could just be chalked down to extreme mood swings. I can't be the only one that thinks of this, right? Anyway, moving on. Thus, we are now in 2024 and our topic for this video: Princess Peach Showtime. Peach is finally getting another shot at having her own game and, well, let's just say I'm mixed on the final result. Now don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound like a negative pansy who thinks Peach should be replaced with Daisy, but also Nintendo, make a Princess Daisy game. Do it, you cowards! While I can safely say that this is a good game overall, and one I definitely enjoyed, looking back at my own experience, I've noticed that this game has given me a lot of torn feelings about how Nintendo should approach their main demographic, who at this point in the year of our Lord 2024, are mostly young adults. This is probably the most torn I've ever been for a Nintendo game since, I don't know, Metroid Other M? To be honest, all I was looking for in this game was to be cute, charming, and fun, and while I did get that, I can't say it left all sunshine and rainbows for me. Here's why Princess Peach Showtime has given me conflicted feelings upon first playthrough.
3, 2, 1.
Now, this is a Peach game, so are we really expecting a deep, compelling story coming from a Mario spin-off?
No.
Princess Peach Showtime follows our titular princess and damsel in distress as she gets invited to the Sparkle Theater to watch a performance. Certainly there will be no issues not running the Mushroom Kingdom whatsoever, but before the show can begin, a dark witch? Sorceress? I don't know. Anyway, she interrupts everything and she's named Madam Grape and the Sour Punch. Who named you this? Anyways, blah blah blah, some dark magic shenanigans happen, Peach loses her crown for no fucking reason, and now it's up to Peach and her new companion, who's this not Luma, not Starlo OC, Stella, to restore all the plays to their former glory using the power of sparkles and stop Madam Grape from whatever she has planned. The story is obviously not the deepest or most compelling in terms of writing, in fact there's nothing like that at all, but I'd say the story serves its purpose well enough to be an enjoyable story. I've always found it awesome how these Mario characters with their own spin-offs can have their own unique villains. I mean, there's King Boo, who's been in multiple games, but we've only seen evil King Boo in Luigi's Mansion. Grape doesn't have a lot going for her, and her motivation at first isn't really clear, but you get to the end and you'll be telling yourself, okay, that was pretty clever. There's not much in terms of development for the story and characters, but is that really needed in a Mario spin-off starring Peach? I mean, sure, Luigi and Wario get some in their respective games, with Luigi showing off his courageous side, overcoming his greatest fears to save his brother, and Wario showing off more of his greed, but this just feels like Peach being Peach. You could say the costumes make her seem a little more badass and sophisticated, and that certainly is true, but other spin-offs have shown this type of trait from Peach before, like in the Paper Mario games, and especially Smash Bros. Princess Peach Showtime only really needed a story that could hold its weight just right, and didn't really need anything compelling or deep, and I think it succeeded. Also, can I just say that I really appreciate that we see absolutely zero signs of Mario or Luigi or anything from the Mushroom Kingdom at all in this game? We only really see the Toads, and that's about it. I just love when spin-off games can take place in their own worlds or locations without having to rely on already established locations in their franchise. It's really awesome to see, but now I think it's high time we get to the meat of this game, starting with the gameplay of Princess Peach Showtime may seem relatively simple on the surface. The game's mostly a side-scroller as you make your way from point A to point B in each level. Peach can interact with characters and objects around her, emphasizing exploration in these levels for the collectibles, then unlock dress designs for Peach, ribbon colors for Stella, and surprisingly a lot more that I discovered, which we'll get to it later. But let's talk about Peach's different roles in these plays, because that's not only the meat of the gameplay, but also what this game is really about.
It is the titular role!
Hey, you shut your face!
To me, Peach isn't just donning these costumes and calling it a day, but more so embodying the spirits of these parts, and that's something I truly admire. Peach has 10 of these roles in total with 3 levels each, and every role she has gives off a bit of gameplay variety with them. For example, Sword Fighter Peach is very agile and acrobatic in her movement and attacks. Detective Peach is more slow-paced and thought-provoking as you inspect and gather clues to the mystery at hand. Figure Skater Peach is more graceful and elegant as she fights using her spins and jumps. And Mermaid Peach is simply just trying to stand out for her opportunity at being an opera singer. Honestly, she could probably take some notes from Manuela and her luscious voice, her beautiful singing voice. My personal favorite of these roles is Ninja Peach, since not only do I find her costume design to look the best on her, but her gameplay overall revolves around sneaking in to strike her enemies, and these wall jumping segments are always fun. Plus the music absolutely slaps. We'll get more into the soundtrack later. So as you can see, there's a lot of variety when it comes to all these roles Peach gets herself involved in, and I personally like all these gameplay styles. All these different settings, all these different roles, it keeps everything feeling fresh. They don't wear out their welcome, but they also aren't done lickety-split since there's multiple levels with them. Variety is the spice of life after all. However, this gameplay style could be considered both a blessing and also a curse, and we'll get into why later. The boss fights are passable? They're not infuriating, but they're also not that interesting and pretty inconsistent, but they're mostly fine. And spoilers right here I suppose, so skip to the timestamp if you don't want to hear them. But there's also these levels where you have to free the spirit of these roles and they all come together in the finale, I think? I don't know, I'm not trying to pay too much attention. It's a freaking Peach game. Honestly, speaking of that finale, while going through it, I could think of absolutely nothing except... yeah, that's just Rosalina. But overall, I would say the gameplay of Princess Peach Showtime is mostly fun. Nice variety, I like the emphasis of exploration even though it sucks, and the controls, while a little stiff at times, were mostly consistent throughout. Nothing outstanding in this regard, but can still be a good time. But in my opinion, the true highlight of this game for me, that really spoke to me when it comes to how brilliant this game is at times, is without a doubt...
Presentation!
Now, presentation isn't normally the best part about a game since you really want gameplay and or story to shine brightest, but my god, this game looks and sounds fantastic in visuals and soundtrack. For those who aren't aware, Princess Peach Showtime was developed by Goodfeel, the developers who also made Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Crafted World. And if there was a developer I would pick for a game like Princess Peach Showtime, it would be Goodfeel. Conceptually, this game is fantastic. I don't think you could have asked for a better scenario in terms of style and theming for Peach to be a part of. The visuals here perfectly encapsulate the aesthetic this game was trying to go for. Making every level look like you were actually watching a play at your own theater is just so genius. Every level has a unique scenario. They're not just using the same assets over and over again, but rather you're always encountering something new, and being like a stage production results in a lot of set pieces and effects really trying to take the spotlight off everything else. Speaking of spotlights, I especially love how the lighting is used very strategically to enhance the visuals and make each level feel like a real-life play, particularly the spotlights that draw attention to either Peach or something else happening in the background. All of this feels like a very novel experience seeing Peach in all these roles. Peach is all about her castle and being dainty, so it's nice to be able to see this new side of Peach given all her facial expressions and animations. On that note, bonus points for Patisserie Peach's adorable idle animation in particular. But it also doesn't lose the essence of who Peach really is. You can tell the developers really wanted to suck you into all the magic and imagination with this aesthetic, and I think they did really well with that. Sure, the gameplay may not be super polished, but I honestly can't help but feel like I get sucked into the charm, imagination, and whimsy that comes with these visuals. Same goes for the soundtrack. Music is simply just another puzzle piece into what makes a game's presentation work so well. If you try putting on the wrong piece, then everything just becomes muddled and confusing. Take Sonic Superstars for example, a game I plan to cover in the future. The soundtrack is already hit or miss, but the misses seem like they feel out of place or not fitting for a Sonic game. Again, video for the future. Now, Mario games always have incredible music no matter what, if it's main series or spin-offs, and this game certainly keeps up with that trend. Every music track feels so unique as they appropriately fit in with the aesthetic, and that's something I can really appreciate. Because let's be real, when you're playing a video game and you listen to a music track for the first time, sometimes you can just go, okay, this is cool and all, but how do you fit? So you may have noticed I've only been talking positively about the game so far, and you're looking at that title thinking, is this clickbait? Is this a kerprank? And my answer is, no. Because the conflicting feelings I have for this game start now. Unfortunately, I do hate to say it, but Princess Peach Showtime does have its flaws. Not counting the obvious one, which we'll get to later in its own section. First off, there's the exploration for all the collectibles, and it feels very contrived. Like once you proceed through a section to the next one, you can't go back to it in the level to find any collectibles you miss, unless you quit out and start the level all over again. You have to look through every single nook and cranny throughout the entire level just to find all the collectibles before you move on, and it ultimately gets really tiring. Thankfully, you can always restart or just play the whole level again to find ones you miss, but a first-time playthrough of this is going to be agonizing. And honestly, the collectibles aren't worth exploring every single little detail in each level. It's just a bunch of cosmetic stuff like different dresses for Peach, ribbon colors for Stella, stuff for the theater. Like there's just no real incentive to complete everything unless you're a completionist. It's just not worth it. Another problem with Princess Peach Showtime is the performance issues. No, I'm not talking about anything visually since the game looks great, but it has to do with the frame rate. Not that it's slow, but rather super inconsistent. Frame rates drop everywhere in this game, and it makes it look super choppy. A lot of people won't have an issue with it, hence why this is more of a nitpick, but it's still pretty annoying given the Switch's track record for a lot of its games with consistent performance. Honestly, this could be its own video topic, but I personally don't care if a game runs at 30 FPS or 60 FPS. Just as long as it's consistent and optimized, I'd be happy with the result. But again, that's a debate for another time. I feel like some roles are just more fun than others, particularly the ones that revolve around combat. Some of them, like Detective and Patisserie Peach, can also be fun in their own ways. But I don't know, I feel like the ones where you're actually fighting in them or there's tense chase scenes in them are the ones that get my attention more so than the rest. Also, one last nitpick, is it just me or does the dialogue in the levels sometimes feel like they're just trying to get through it as fast as possible? Now I will say that this nitpick is more of a pro and a con, but it just seems like the dialogue can go bonkers sometimes and it's just a jumbled mess. Now I say it's a pro and a con in the sense that the dialogue moving through quickly in levels is how real life plays can be. They're not going to stop and just repeat a word or sentence you forgot about or if they messed up, because you, sir, were not paying attention. All these people have a performance to put on, damn it, and the show has to keep going. But also, why couldn't we just have the option of having an auto-scroll feature on the dialogue like how some recent Nintendo games have done this very thing? And whatever, it's not too much of an issue, but rather just something I couldn't get out of my head. But now, I can't really dodge the bullet anymore. It's time to get into Princess Peach Showtime's biggest flaw, and the biggest reason why this game makes me as conflicted as I am about it. Now I'm sure us gamer nerds are already aware about this by now, but Nintendo in recent years has struggled to convey the acknowledgement of their primary audience through their games for quite a while now, and this is, in my opinion, the biggest problem with Princess Peach Showtime. Nintendo's games are intended to be enjoyed by kids and adults first and foremost. Anyone can pick up a Mario or Zelda or Kirby game and have fun with it. Kids could only learn the basics and still have a fun time, while adults can enjoy them for wanting to dive deeper into the game, whether it be for the extra challenge a lot of these games offer, or mastering the game's controls and mechanics. Easy to pick up, hard to master. That's Nintendo. Princess Peach Showtime isn't like this. Sure, the gameplay can be fun and there's a lot of variety, but at the same time, it feels too simple. It's not so much the difficulty and how easy the objectives are, or how the difficulty is basically non-existent in this game that's the problem, which is already another problem in and of itself, but I digress. It's more so the simplicity of it all. This game, in my personal opinion, isn't all that engaging to warrant many more replays because it simply doesn't keep me invested for too long, aside from the pretty visuals. There was a lot of discourse surrounding this game, especially after that demo they released where Nintendo basically shot themselves in the foot, and everyone concluded that the game could be too easy and too simple for adults to enjoy. Thankfully, the whole game is much better than that demo, but sometimes it still feels like I'm taking a stretch with that statement. And this, of course, gets a lot of people insisting, well, this is a game for kids, and it's acceptable for a game of this caliber to be as easy as it wants to be. While this is certainly correct, and people are valid for bringing this point up, it eventually becomes the most shallow pit you've ever stepped into when you realize my point brought up before about how other Nintendo games have been very similar in essence, but don't feel like they were specifically made for children only. How about we do a little comparison here? Let's talk about everyone's favorite pink puffball and cannibalist extraordinaire, Kirby. His games are easy like Peach Showtime, right? Plus having a cute, charming, and whimsical aesthetic to it as well, so what gives Kirby a free pass? Well, the answer to that, my fellow nerds, revolves around a single word: depth. Kirby games, as easy as they are, have depth to them. They have other modes to play, they have boss rushes that amp the difficulty up, and they can be quite challenging. Plus the lore is so disturbing that some evil entities could end up being your sleep paralysis demon. Totally not calling myself out on this notion. Princess Peach Showtime lacks depth, and it's a real shame. Plus, there's always the case that Peach Showtime to a lot of people is just a feel-good, stress-free game that could just be a cozy time, which is also a very valid point, and do you see why I have conflicting feelings now? The game is fun to play, there's a lot of variety, and has an outstanding presentation. But at the same time, the gameplay feels lacking despite being fun. It's far too easy, and the game's simplicity makes it difficult for me to feel engaged by it all, and there's no real incentive to come back to this game aside from getting all the collectibles and all the extra little challenges and minigames they throw in there. It's like you're walking on the thinnest tightrope you've ever tried to balance yourself on, in the sense that the game is fun, but how long will it be fun for you before wanting to move on to another game? Variety may be the spice of life when it comes to gameplay, but it's also significant in the fact that there's not really an identity to this game, and none of these gameplay styles and all these roles don't really stand out. It's more of a jack-of-all-trades situation where nothing is fantastic, but nothing is really a slog to get through either. Again, comparing that to a Kirby game, what makes them more special is that the variety comes from Kirby's copy abilities while still maintaining the core gameplay mechanics. This makes things more fun for the player since there's several different options to go about each level. Do you want to just float around to your heart's content and give absolutely zero fucks? Or do you want to get that sweet sword or fighter copy ability and mow down every pathetic enemy that gets in your way? Do you see why that might be a problem here? It seems like this game was made with the intention of being a kid's game and only a kid's game, rather than one that could be enjoyed by kids and adults. And that could suck for a lot of us adults because a lot of us were really excited for this game when it was first announced. And while some of these adults may still enjoy the game and come back to it in the future, in which case more power to them, to me, I can't have that same feeling because a lot of the pieces are there, there was clearly a lot of heart put into this game, and Nintendo's head is in the right place, but the execution is just lacking to me. And I likely have a frustrating answer as to why this might be the case. It's Peach herself. As Arlo put it in his own video, which I'll put in a card right here, a lot of adults were really looking forward to this, but because the game is about Peach and since she's a princess and a girl, then according to Nintendo, clearly the game should be made for little girls, right? Because that's how we, as a company, view Peach's fans to be, so we should also alienate it from adults. E for everyone doesn't mean kids only, Nintendo. It means everyone can pick up a game and enjoy it. Though I do appreciate how the game gets progressively better the more you play. Like, the gameplay itself becomes slightly more demanding, themes for each role become more dire and take a surprisingly darker tone, and that's something I can respect, and the game has a little more fun with these dire themes. And, well, shouldn't that be what video games aspire to do in the first place? To be fun first and foremost? You know, all that negative talk I just conjured up must mean I don't really like Princess Peach Showtime, right?
No.
Despite what criticisms I may have on this game, I would still consider this a good game. The charming and whimsical presentation, the gameplay, albeit being lacking and not very polished, is still varied and can still be enjoyable. The costumes and roles Peach partakes in are wonderful, the soundtrack is pretty solid, and I can appreciate how this Peach game can truly feel like its own unique thing rather than feeling like a Mario platformer with a coat of paint over it. Now don't get me wrong, I love Super Princess Peach as well, but it definitely feels all too familiar like any other Mario platformer, main series or spin-off. That's not the case with Princess Peach Showtime, as it achieves the feeling of being unique in the Mario universe. And to those trying to chastise us that this is Balan Wonderworld but better, like this game being Nintendo's Balan because of the stage and, no, don't you fucking dare insult Peach like that. That is a sin and immediately paints a negative light on this game, and just, no. Peach deserves better than being compared to that shit stain. If I had to compare Peach Showtime with another game, it's more like Nintendo's Puppeteer, which is an incredibly underrated game, by the way. It was a Sony exclusive that released on the PS3 in 2013, and could have been a huge inspiration. 2D side-scroller, stage play-based aesthetic, and platformer, which certainly has more DNA than this thing that shall never be talked about again on my channel. Do not test me. Video games are meant to be fun, to just have a good time. Princess Peach Showtime is definitely a fun game, and I had a good time with it. But would this be something I return to someday? Probably not. The gameplay feels rough even though it's fun, it's far too easy and simple, and was clearly made to be aimed towards a much younger audience. And you know what? That's okay. Not everyone is going to feel the same way. If you enjoy this game, that's great, and I'm happy you're able to find enjoyment. If you resent this game to hell and back and will always complain about it, I don't know why you would when you could just talk about something else, but that's okay. If you're like me, who just thinks it's a mixed bag with some underrated stuff in it, and not a lot of great stuff, that's also okay. People are people. That's all there is to it, really. We're going to have different opinions on everything we talk about, and it can result in some interesting discussions. Unless you just want to look like a whiner for the sake of it. So just take this as an important point you need to understand about humans. We're all different, and we're all special in our own way.